who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome back, it's End of Dragons Daily 18. Today, I was anticipating discussing the daily stuff. However, yesterday we talked about some news and the release of some promotional art, some images, some concept art for the expansion, and there were actually 2 pieces of art that I missed, and a lot of really great discussion that came forward. So today we'll actually be looking at that. Footage in the background should be World vs. World. Hey, what can I say? It's been reset. I've got to get the diamond chest. Those of you who watched my Legendary Gear video yesterday obviously saw I have this idea of like a World vs. World tab where it exhibits all the best World vs. World skins. And man, that is going to be a lot of grind, but I'll go for it. Especially, I just want the focus. So yeah, the build I'm running, I'm on Mesmer again. It's just so easy to roam on Mesmer. But every week I try something a little bit different. This time, if you watch closely, I'm leaning 100% into sharper images. So I'm basically 100% bleed duration after the chaos trait kicks in. I'll be at 100%, and then as much crit chance as possible, as much multi-packet Infinite Horizon stuff as possible, while also not being too bad. It's weird because I'm actually trying the Bringers stat set, which is like a Condi stat set with no Condi damage on it. But the idea is it doesn't matter that you have low Condi damage because you're just going to overpower them with like 40 bleed. So hopefully that's fun to watch. And another quick topic before we get into the video. Now, I don't want to bog this down too much, but it is pretty important. I've been putting it off. It's prompted by this message here. Egg Fried Bryce 6 days ago. So End of Dragons 12, I guess. Please do these as podcasts. Really want to listen and work elsewhere on my phone. Plus, will not be paying the rip-off YouTube subscription. Now, I don't know about the YouTube subscription. Do they offer that as a service on the site now? I don't think I've ever really looked into that. Is that not called YouTube Red still at this point? But yes, you guys have asked for podcasts several times in the past, and I've got a bit of a weird thing going on with Patreon at the moment. Obviously, Patreon is the be-all and end-all. I hate talking about it on the videos, especially regularly if I feel like I haven't been doing good enough stuff. But I think that there's a cool marriage here. You guys might remember in December, I pointed out I want to do my gameplay videos a little bit different. I don't want to bulk them out anymore, because what happened through 2020 is I did these bulks and we had like these massive sprees of loads of videos, and then it would kind of fall away. So I'm trying now on the day production, which is cool, but that means for Patreon, and really I want to think about Patreon second, not first. But because I'm covering Guild Wars 2, frankly, then the viewership is not there to have just a pure life on ad revenue. I do need to think about that service, and anyone who was ever kind enough to follow me over there now isn't getting one of the main perks, which is to be able to watch things early, because I'm not bulking stuff up. So I've been thinking about a new bonus, and well, this looks like a really good fit. It's actually true that a long time ago, I did used to do audio-only versions of the videos, and I hosted them on Patreon as something of a perk. But the way I used to do it, I think I had the wrong file format or something, so I did it for like a year, and no one was really using it because it wasn't valuable in any way. But I can sort that out, and I think it could be valuable now. So to Egg Fried Bryce, cool idea. Yeah, I'll do that for you. Starting with this evening, I'll look into setting that up. And yeah, anyone who follows me over there, you can get them not only in podcast form, but I'll do you one better. I'll give you it a day in advance as well, so people can watch the next episode early if they like, and ad-free. I don't really know what else I can do to make it better. I was very close to giving like a bonus question. You know, you have End of Dragons Daily and then an extra question if you're over on Patreon. But I don't know, man. I don't want to cut stuff away, but just because people aren't on Patreon, I want it all to be there for everyone. That's how I've always operated. So, I don't know. We will just do it a day early. And what this is really about, guys, is an excuse for me to mention Patreon on these videos, and hopefully just through pure force of effort and reminding people, I can, you know, start to turn things around. Right, let's get on in with the video, shall we? Starting off this from Noct, says the main character stand-in for the Icebreed Saga is already a female. It's a female Norn right now. Yeah, I completely spaced on this. That shows how disconnected, honestly, I've been from a lot of the press side stuff with the Icebreed Saga. And we mentioned on the previous part that maybe that mysterious lady in the image was just the stand-in for the commander. I now no longer believe that at all. I kind of proposed that maybe they had, you know, swapped the gender because it's usually a male, but it's not even a male right now. And as we mentioned yesterday, that Ruby said on the stream, whoever that was in the picture is not someone we know. and we know the commander, right? I know that we don't know every commander, and the commander is kind of more of a concept rather than a tangible, but let's be real, we know the commander, and it would just seem weird to me that they would put such focus on a mysterious character just for it to then turn out, oh, it's the commander. Like, that's boring. You gotta remember, sometimes answers to questions are boring, but not when they're being constructed by companies to generate hype. You know, I don't think they're in the business of trying to give you an anticlimax during the press for End of Dragons. I think this is a real character doing something else. And yes, right now it's already a female. She even has a name. It's funny, I forgot about this, but during, I think it was the first Dragon Bash in Holbrack, the stand-in during the Path of Fire era, his name's Duncan, was seen battling the holographic stuff, and then the new stand-in was with her. Do you guys remember? I have this weird memory of exactly talking about this mysterious character in a video, and then it ended up the stand-in, and apparently that would just end up falling out of my head. I did learn going to the wiki about this today, check this out, that over on the Guild Wars 2 Tumblr, an area I very rarely go to, they even posted how to make your own Duncan. Look at this. And they even had a whole body of text. The character who represents the commander in all of our Living World Season 4 trailers is very popular and has become something of a heartthrob. A few people have wanted to make him in game, so here are the details. He's an engineer, he's a holo, his height... This is interesting, guys. That might mean the End of Dragons stand-in has possession of one of those elite specs. Does the current woman for Icebreed Saga have an elite spec? His height is just below the max with the first masculine body shape. He is the first Elonian face and the second hairstyle with the Path of Fire in the 4th and 8th pages of their respective categories if you're using a total makeover kit. His beard is on the last page of the facial hair category. His skin color is dark 6. His hair color is black red. His eyes are leaf green. All of his facial parameters are set to the halfway mark on the slider, except for those shown in the second image above. His clothes are dyed with mud metal, sunset, white gold, and midnight red, and he wears all Sunspear armor and weapons. You'd think that the stand-ins might be a little bit like, say, Ritlock or Logan, and you can only just about approximate them, but no, you can fully create this dude, and I wonder if we'll get another post like this before the year is up of the next stand-in. Funny stuff, and I hadn't seen that. So here's a big important thing. Relfed says, looks like you missed 2 pieces of concept art that they'd released. Specifically these 2, and he's got some images. One of them's called Strange Familiarity, the other one's called The Wheel Turns. He says, in the blog post you pulled the others from, only included the first 4 images directly, but there's a link to a zip file with high-res versions and these extra 2. The quotes are visible in the metadata for the files. Now, listen, I was looking in with media info as closely as I could at the details of these files, and I couldn't figure out where the names are from. What do you mean it's from the metadata of the files? Can anyone teach me how to extract that stuff? That was something I could not find. Anyway, and then they give some of their thoughts on what these pieces are, so let's throw them up here. In truth, I had actually already seen these as they were hosted on the wiki. I just didn't get to the zip file and end up importing them in the video yesterday. Here what you're looking at are the highest resolution versions that I can find. So first here we've got Strange Familiarity, I believe that's the title of this one. And it reminds, I guess what we're looking at is Echo Vald, probably. Maybe this is one of their great grand buildings. The title, the Strange Familiarity thing, is kind of in essence saying the same thing as the title of the Xingji piece from yesterday, right? What this really reminds me of, though, what this is strangely familiar to for me, I don't know whether you guys will agree, is Tyria, funnily enough. And the idea of, you know, being in the middle of the bowl of Tyria and looking at, say, the North Wall or whatever, it feels very sheer. Maybe it's the Golden Light, I'm not sure. We get more bubbles and watery effects here. It would be a stretch, I think, to assume this is a Tyria connection, but as I proposed in other videos, I like the idea of Glint's legacy having something to do with Kunavang. Like, I can't imagine a world in which Glint is coming up with this whole thing to break the Elder Dragon cycle, and she never spoke to Kunavang about it at any point. So maybe Kunavang is in on the idea, maybe we've got more places, more hidden cities, more areas with Exalted in them, and, you know, Cantha is filled with humans were becoming Exalted. I like that idea. I was talking to Cossage about the lore just yesterday, and the topic of why the Zephyrites went to Cantha for a little while before we saw they came back and they'd retrieved the egg from the dragon's lair and stuff. What did they do at Cantha at that point? Well, maybe they, as the Brotherhood of the Dragon descendants, had some connection with these people. That's what all of this image makes me think of, because I'm just obsessed with the Tyria side of stuff. It also feels a little bit like some of the Guild Wars 1 concept art for the Great Northern Wall. But again, I feel like that is, you know, almost just accidental. The bubbles on screen make me think it might be a part of a vision sequence, just like we saw the characters seem to be in some kind of vision-like trance-like thing. Or it's a suggestion that there's going to be magical bubbles floating all over Cantha now, 260 years later. Why? Because the deep sea dragon's around? I don't know. Or, yeah, they'll just flood it all, as we proposed before. The final piece here is called The Wheel Turns. And again, if you remember in the commentary yesterday, I talked about that as like a theme of the expansion. I got that concept from the title of this art, which I never even talked about there. The idea of that just makes me think of friggin' Utopia, which we know was sort of semi-canonized by the art book recently, where the devs talked about that stuff and talked about a lot of the lore as though it was real. We're also looking at what seems to be an island in the mists, and the Aether Blades are in the mists and all that stuff. I'm starting to think maybe some Utopia-oriented elements might come in on this expansion, as well as Cantha. Maybe that's where we lead into further stuff. That would be really weird that Guild Wars 2 therefore ends up following very, very similar course, subject material-wise, as what Guild Wars 1 once upon a time proposed to do. As for the art itself, I mean, what can we say? It looks kind of Maguma Jungle-y. I don't really have much going on. The only other thing I'd say again is there's the bubbles there. Maybe there's a chance here, guys, that these are snippets from some kind of trailer or vision or, you know, mini cutscene in the middle of the game that they're just giving us little brief glimpses of. Think about like in Path of Fire, where when we go to the sunken hidden city of Kesho, speaking about the Exalted and so on, we get that vision, right? And it's a nice concept art-y kind of picture that really talks about Glint's proposal of replacing Elder Dragons. Imagine if they just took a couple of those screenshots, and it's kind of an amazing thing for me to mention here as well, because that's the first place we got a hint of the Deep Sea Dragon. Imagine they took a couple of those screenshots and released them before Path of Fire. It kind of feels like that's what these might be an equivalent to me. They seem like they're the same of some similar sequence, but what would the voiceover be talking about? I guess that's the real question. Next, we have Kairos, who steps in to set me right. I was confused in the previous video. I asked you guys for comment on it, and well, here he says, you are confused about the Aether Blade logo, WP. The logo first appeared in the trailer. There is a very quick shot there with a banner that was the Aether Blade logo. Then when people noticed it, that was when they revealed this new image with the airships, which confirmed they were indeed Aether Blades. And I guess that second image confirms they're Aether Blades without actually showing the Aether Blades on it themselves, right? So I now understand the full story. That is what I've been missing. Because like I said yesterday, I couldn't see an Aether Blade logo on that new art that we were talking about yesterday. It was in the trailer, and that art came second. It's not like they doubled up with a frame. I understand completely now. Next, we've got Ashton C, who says, I wonder what the odds are that the images are for loading screens and named after story steps. Perhaps an echo in the mist is part of the intro story steps that get us to Cantha through following signs of the Aether Blades into the mists. It's funny that you have that as a proposal, because if you think about the finale of Season 4, Kralkatorrik could have broken out of the mists anywhere. We turned out to have broken down basically near, you know, near Ore. We were basically still Central Tyria. But they could have written that we busted out in Cantha. Now, is that realistic? Possibly. If they were following the idea of going expansion, living world, expansion, living world, expansion, living world, then yeah, we could have just busted out. Dragonfall would have been on the borders of Cantha, and then the next expansion would have been in Cantha straight away, instead of the Icebrood Saga. In another world, I think that this thing you've proposed here, they would have done already, and they maybe even kept that door slightly open for themselves. The image, I know you and yet I don't, could be a story set with llama drama between Marjorie and Cass after we arrive in Cantha at Xingji, and maybe we find out some backstory that leaves Cass questioning how well she knows Marjorie. I could certainly see A Song Half Remembered being a story step in the Kurzak area of the world, given their association with singing in the Echo Veld. Look, the whole drama between Kaz and Marjorie thing, I can't say excites me in the slightest, but I do want to see them do something interesting with her. In my opinion, my favourite moment of Marjorie's story was actually when she went off to be a detective, following and tailing Lazarus. Well, ostensibly Lazarus turned out to actually be Balthazar. I thought that was a fascinating setup to a really interesting plot. And then they just kind of dropped it really quickly and it didn't manifest into anything. If they go for something similar and, you know, go further with it this time in the expansion, I could see a lot of exciting stuff for Marjorie. Right now, though, I'm not that compelled by her character. And just because she has, like, some strenuous connection through her ethnicity to the continent, it doesn't immediately mean that she's going to be a star in this this one, you know, and I just hope they do something good. I've also noticed that every expansion, the cast they take with us into that expansion isn't necessarily what I'd expect, and it works in ways that I didn't know was going to be fun. So I would even buy, like, Jarvi coming with us to Cantha, you know? Like, you don't think of her as having a stake in that story, but you never know, she might in the end. Continuing on, you say, perhaps we're seeking out a song used in Cantha's past to calm the deep sea dragon in a previous cycle. After all, we know a good bit about how the last cycle was handled in Tyria, but not really how it was handled in Cantha, the Dragon Empire, that likely didn't have Jotun, Sears, or Massart faffing about. Taking a line from the trailer, they built new lives upon the very thing that sought to end theirs. Then perhaps we're seeking to soothe, purify, put to sleep the deep sea dragon, which is threatening to wake up post Icebreed Saga events, and the woman in the promised future image is the main Canthan hero who knows of the song and is helping us on our mission, likely via a liaison with Kunavang. Lol, maybe the song will be another version of Fear Not This Night, and the character will actually sing it in-game during the climactic boss fight. Right, well, you kind of went way off into fanfiction territory there, but I do have some thoughts. Now, this thing about the Jotun, the Seers, and the Massart, I noticed you didn't say Forgotten, and that's, I guess you might know the lore well enough to realize you can't say Forgotten because it was proved they were there, and there are even some interesting little nods that maybe the Naga came from the Forgotten through some, you know, long lineage. And I think it's kind of bad to suggest that none of those other races were there either. It was a long time ago, but really the story that ArenaNet set up is that these were vast, powerful civilizations that would rival or even excel the civilizations we have in the world today. You know, the Jotun weren't just a little bit better than brutes. They were badasses. They were intellectuals. They had these great observatories and this incredible understanding of the universe and the world. To think they wouldn't have explored, and to think that they wouldn't have pushed their borders or their boundaries far enough away. Like, I like to imagine that the world of 10,000 years ago, before this current, the previous cycle, I like to think that was every bit as rich as this world. I like to think that there were Jotun travelers wandering far away into, like, Seer territory, you know, off on the other side of the world. And that could happen with all of these guys. So I do believe that there should be Jotun around there. And, you know, they could do, you know, if you're going to do the Forgotten into Naga thing, maybe you could do the Jotun into Yeti thing, if you really wanted. You know, I'd like to see the ruins of an old Seer city down there in Cantha. In some ways, the devs have to be careful about it, because you do want to make this feel like a very distant, far away area of the world. You want to make it feel alien, and usually they kind of struggle with that, I think, and Tyria therefore as a setting ends up feeling a bit smaller than it should. And, you know, if you do too much of this, then it's going to continue to feel small, but I like the idea that they're still around. As for how they survived the deep sea dragon, now this the devs could do a lot with, because there's kind of an implicit suggestion with the story right now that because of the Bloodstone, and then later the Bloodstone shards, all being up in central Tyria, that at the previous cycle, as the dragons ate everything, they kind of all ended up crowding around in that one area of the world. Tyria, the planet, is massive, and yet all this Elder Dragon stuff is localized to just these small areas that we're in. Why is that? Well, the suggestion might be that it's because that's where the remaining magic was, because the Seers had been very smart and managed to lock it away, and now they were kind of hunting, so they were kind of sniffing around there before finally falling asleep. And you can say that certainly about 5 of the dragons, but then you got the Deep Sea Dragon, who is presumably very distant. I mean, we haven't really seen it directly, or its minions directly. We've just seen its effects through, you know, the movement of the Karka and the crate and so on. So they could seek about answering this question in the expansion. Why is the Deep Sea Dragon far away? And is it because the people in the region of the territories of Cantha did something different? And I really think that the answer to that should be yes, because you've got this whole heritage of it being the Dragon Empire, and the stories about how there were a ton of different types of dragons, many of them friendly, all these different species that were there, that, you know, were very, very ingrained with the cultures that ended up developing there. And, you know, there's the whole thing about the humans there being more ancient than the humans in other places. It seems special in a way, and I think that they can tie that to the Deep Sea Dragon. This is why, for years and years and years, I've proposed that the Deep Sea Dragon could be an ally. And I want to say, at this point, with the end of Dragon's Press and so on, that is still potentially true. It's just very complicated now, because we were given a trailer with 2 voices, 2 dragons presumably, and also presumably neither of them is the DSD. It was pretty fun. Funny little observation from Steph here, who says, thanks God there was no voice-acted singing in Factions. Can you imagine that with the voice acting like Togo's? Yeah, good point. For those that were out of the loop, Factions had horrendous voice acting in general, so it's not a surprise to me that they didn't go for any kind of singing. Ailes here again today says, well, I thought there was something off in how bad the game looked in some of your videos. Now it's explained. This was due to me pointing out my low graphic settings. I sincerely hope you can find a solution, first of all, for you, and second, for prospective players. It is not a great series that aims at building expectation for the expansion and getting in the interest of potential new players to show a game that looks terrible. Yeah, well, I can't fix my PC at the moment, and the one thing I would say is I personally don't really care how the game looks. I don't know whether everyone has this. I expect we all do to a certain degree, but I very quickly acclimate to whatever I'm doing. Like, I stop appreciating the graphics of a product after a certain amount of time. And that works in my favor when it means I'm going back and playing old games, and that works against me when I'm playing new stuff. You know, yesterday's footage where we were doing the cool puzzle in Path of Fire, that looked gorgeous, but by the time I was finished with that story instance, I already wasn't really appreciating it again. Like, I looked at it and I was wowed, and I thought, this is amazing. And I was moving around on my skimmer at one point as well, and looking at how beautifully textured the skimmer skin was, and thinking how great so many ArenaNet assets are, and how underutilized so many of them are, and I was obsessed with the audioscape, and then like 5 minutes later I was just kind of forgetting about it, because I was focusing on the gameplay, I guess. That happens to me all the time in games. But you are right, this series should have good graphics for all the randoms coming in, and I do believe on that. And so, you know, hopefully I can fix my PC. Someone gave me some advice about the caps on my motherboard. I'll try to figure it out, guys. I'm juggling a few balls here at the moment. Grant says, if you look really closely at the image of the supposed Mai Trin, look behind her with all the weird shapes. There's definitely a weird shape of what looks like perhaps a bunny-ish creature, and there's also one that looks oddly close to a large flower. The shapes are very interesting. You see, your mind works very differently to me. I just think that's random patterns, you know, that you're looking for some kind of meaning in, but I just gloss over this stuff. This is exactly the kind of thing that I miss. Because to me, it's like, yeah, look, they're going to bear a passing resemblance to something, but they're clearly not hinting at anything. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you guys think? Is the bunny-ish shape of some note in this? I mean, you're not the only one that said this, by the way. I have noticed it a few times. I don't think there's anything in this. Surely. Stefan says, in this video, a rare thing happened. WP not explaining something for those out of the loop. So I will ask, WP, what is that Miku story from the Winds of Change? Yeah, so this is a tightrope for me. You got to understand, guys, because I like to explain. I like to keep the complete noobs in the loop. But then I get all these accusations of, like, padding the video or patronizing or whatever. Because at the end of the day, most viewers are selfish, and they assume that the video is only made for them and their current understanding of the game. So if I start going off on a tangent about something they think is obvious, they're gonna, you know, they're gonna criticize it. So usually that's the situation I'm in. However, for this series, because we have a time limit, you know, I'm looking at the fact that we're approaching the time limit already. I'm skipping over details because I want to get to more questions, but I will explain this as fast as possible because I think it's pretty cool what the devs did. When Factions first came out, there was a moment in the story where a temple, the Tanakai temple, got attacked. And you, the hero, go through, you basically save a spirit at that temple, and you move on about your story. And presumably a lot of people died, and it was an upsetting moment, but they don't really linger on it. Then, once all the Guild Wars 1 stuff was done, and they were making Guild Wars 2, they added new content back to that game. It was like Living World. It was called Guild Wars Beyond. And so, when the Guild Wars Beyond stuff came back to Cantha, it was set years off in the future. And what they did was they said, do you remember that attack on the temple years ago? Turns out there was this family there, and they all died, and it was all very tragic, except one member, actually 2 members in the end, of the family got away. And they basically ran off into exile thinking that they were the only one. And this is a character that ends up joining your team as a hero. It was one of the 2 heroes that you could get from the Winds of Change campaign. Then a bunch of other story happens in which you find out another one of the children survived and they kind of head off against each other. And anyway, your new companion helps you save the day and defeat the big bad. You know, I won't go into the whole Winds of Change story, but we have a prominent, interesting character who, you know, may have people descended from them, and you could see stuff happen there. I like the idea of, you know, looking at the Vizu and Nika line as well. Again, Vizu and Nika being prominent assassins. One from right around the Harvest Temple and the Jade Wind, one from Factions, and now maybe you can have another daughter another 200 years later. I like all of these. Let's see what happened to their guild, the Obsidian Flame. Right, next we got Tech Striker 1, who says, anyone know of Guild Wars 2 references to Menlo besides the armor or Sin. I can't find anything mentioned on the wiki about graves or anything else, and Sin only seems to have an obscure mention regarding a book tile. So yes, a few of you guys talked about Menlo. He came up yesterday, and I kind of said, well, look, wouldn't he have gone back to Corteria and lived out the rest of his days there? Is he really that interesting? I think I'm wrong about this, because it is true there isn't a grave for Menlo up there. I think there's a book in Divinity's Reach that says, oh, this was my time with the Luxons. And it's one of those Divinity's Reach book cart things where you can't actually read the actual text. You could just read the title and the idea of the book. And then, yes, there's Menlo's armor. Is that with strength runes on it? Or monk runes, I guess, maybe? And that's all we've really got. And there is the very important detail that I had several messages about. That obviously Menlo did take over, at least for a time, as headmaster after Togo dies at Xingji Monastery. So it's also very likely that Menlo lived out the rest of his days at Xingji, and he could well have some small part to play or influence in this upcoming story. Maybe we will finally get a grave to Menlo, and it will be at the monastery. I would like that a lot, and it would definitely honour that Winds of Change news that he became headmaster. So there you go, guys. That about rounds it up, I think. Next time, tomorrow, we will be talking about the potential for the daily system. I've had a ton of comments about that. And if you want to watch it right now, it's over on Patreon. So there'll be a link in the description for that. Please do consider it. Even if you don't think you can access the perk through the tier or whatever, I'll probably put it on the high tier for now, see who joins. And if people don't join, I'll put it on the next one. But just in general, if you appreciate what I'm doing, if you want to see these videos, go ahead. If you're feeling generous anyway, please do go for that. There'll be a link in the description. And to everyone else, let's see your comments. Let's keep it going, and I will see you for the next one tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.